So today we are sharing from 1 Timothy chapter 2. We have Pastor Joshua sharing from Malaysia. So this passage is really hard for many people. Many churches struggle. We struggle through this passage, this chapter. But let me tell you, in traditional commentary, traditional churches, they are very conservative that women would need to cover their head. And women can never be ordained as pastors. They cannot be pastors. That's in tradition. And more traditionally, women can't even talk or speak. In 1 Corinthians, it says that women are not permitted to speak. But now, the trend today is, in the church sector, more relaxed because it's so hard to do so. It's too conservative. It's too far from the reality. So the Methodists that I belonged to in the past, even now they ordain female pastors. But in the past they did not. But now gradually, slowly they open up. And the Mennonites that I belonged to was also straight, but they are struggling in this truth. Maybe 20 years ago, now they open up more and more. They continue to struggle on these issues, but they are also more relaxed. To so-called that a woman should not teach or have authority. Now, some churches gradually open up. Is the tradition wrong? So, what should we do? How should we handle this? I should say that the tradition was wrong because from 1 Timothy chapter 2, here it said, I do not permit a woman to preach, verse 12, or to have authority over a man, but to be in silence. That means she cannot speak, just to be in silence. And she cannot teach or preach. Just from this verse, we interpret it wrong. Why? First Timothy chapter 2, we misplace this chapter. We think that it's a church order. We take it as a church order. So Paul was speaking to the New Testament church as a church order. And then in chapter 3, it talks about deacons and overseers. So from chapter 1, and then in chapter 2, and then we suddenly say, okay, this is the church order in chapter 2. The order in the church, how you should arrange the church. But if you read it carefully, he is not talking about a church order. Whether a woman can preach or not in church. No. He's not talking about church order. How do I know that? Chapter 2, verse 1. Therefore. And then verse 8. Therefore, I desire therefore. So, therefore, because of what he said in the chapter 1. There are false teachers, right? And talk about how we use the law. So chapter 1, he was telling Timothy to arise and wage the good warfare. Be a good disciple, an apostle, and fight the good warfare. Resist the false teacher to share the false doctrine. That they did not share the doctrine that Paul was saying. Because the gospel is entrusted to Paul. But the people did not preach the gospel that Paul was entrusted to. They talk about fables and endless genealogies, and there were endless disputes. And they attack Paul in many ways. They want to put Paul to be in prison. They want Paul to die. So Paul was telling Timothy, arise and wage the good warfare. I don't have much time left. I will pass this on to you. So he entrusts to Timothy so that he can arise and fight this good warfare. Therefore, in chapter 2, verse 1, you need to pray for all men. Pray for all men. All men. Everyone. You need to pray for them. Pray for the kings as well. And then in verse 8, I desire therefore that the man, what should the man do? And then what should women do? So there is a context. It comes in this order. Maybe because of the influence of chapter 3, then you just put this chapter into the church order and say, oh, this is how we should run the church. But Paul was not talking about a church order. It talked about what you do in the house, in family. How should the church behave? That's in 1 Corinthians chapter 14. Let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 14. We go back to 1 Corinthians first, then we go back to 1 Timothy's. 1 Corinthians chapter 14, 34, let your women keep silent in the churches, for they are not permitted to speak. Now, this is church order. Let them they are not permitted to speak. More straight here, right? And then 1 Timothy chapter 2 didn't talk about congregation, but in 1 Corinthians here. But they are to be submissive, as the law also says. And if they want to learn something, let them ask their own husbands at home, for it is shameful for women to speak in church. Or did the word of God come original from you, or was it you only that it reached? Here, 1 Corinthians say that women keep in silent in the churches, not permitted to speak. But today, of course, women do speak in church. First Timothy chapter 2 is not referring to a church order, to the congregation. It's about how we behave and conduct at home. So basically, it's husband and wife relationship. It's parallel. Talk about man and then talk about woman. So Paul was saying this. Man and woman at home, how should they behave and conduct themselves? They're not talking about the church order, whether women can teach or preach in church. So what is Paul saying here? As we are doing exegesis, we must understand fully the intention of Paul writing this. Why is he writing this? He didn't intend that women could, he did not intend for the church order that women cannot speak or talk, but it's about at home. We need to understand the society. So the Ephesian churches and the Corinthian church. 1 Corinthians, Paul said that because the city of Corinth was full of idols. It talks about eating meat, right, in the book of Corinthians. Why did Paul talk about this in the book of Corinthians? Because the whole city, if the meat you want to eat, it definitely have been offered to idols. All the meats after worshipping in the temple will be brought to the market for sale. If you don't want to need the food of idols, then you have nothing to eat. So they argue whether I should eat the meat or I shouldn't. Can I eat the food sacrificed to idol or not? That's the problem. The whole city was worshipping idols. The power of idols was strong. And the whole society was strongly influenced by idols. So in book of Corinthians, some women, they became Christians. They had the gifts of tongues. They thought that they were angels. As theological, charismatic women, they took themselves as angels. After they became Christians, they thought they were godly. And then the society was morally corrupt. So when they went to another extreme, they reject to have intimacy with their husbands. They refused to sleep with their husband. They thought that they would be godly. Because there was too many temple prostitutes. So if anything, then their husband would go to temple prostitutes, or they would go to like a homosexuality with the temple's prostitutes. That's the way of idol worshipping in the idol temples. In the idol temples, the temple prostitute, the man would sit down and then the female temple prostitute will teach them. So they teach the man and then they had sex with men. And then they receive power from idols, receive blessings from idols. The whole city was like that. And then the temple prostitutes, the female temple prostitutes would teach in the temple. All men sitting down listen to the female temple prostitutes and then have sex with them. That's the church of Corinth. So it's totally corrupt. That's why Paul told the Corinthian church, you take pride. They will marry their stepmother. That's one of the things that the Corinthian church would take pride in. So the whole church is corrupt, is chaos, is chaotic. So that's why Paul said that let your women keep in silence and not to speak. So you must know, in the synagogue, there are men's quarter, female quarter, of men and female. They are totally separated in the synagogues. But in the Corinthian church, they became Christians. They are free. They are affected by the worldly idol-worshipping cultures. They say, oh, that should be the case. Oh, that's how we worshiping God. So man and woman will mix together. So the women also teach, preach. They took themselves as the temple prostitutes, full of authority. And they will have intimacy with men who are not their husbands. That's the culture at the time. They teach, and then they have intimacy with other men. That's why Paul was very straight towards the Corinthian church. That's why we have 1 Corinthians chapter 14. They were not permitted to speak in silence and total submission to the husband. Paul was trying to correct that culture in the book of Corinthians. And after Corinthians, then, how about the church in Ephesus? So there was the temple of Artemis. So that's a Diana, and it's Queen of Heaven. The whole city of Ephesus was under the power of a Queen of Heaven and Diana. So they believed that there was a pillar from Artemis from heaven to Ephesus. That's why they built this big temple of Artemis of Diana. So to the Chinese, we take Artemis as Queen of Heaven, that idol. So in that place, there were a lot of temple prostitutes, male and female. Male with male, and female with female. And female temple prostitutes also taught that place. And then they had sex before the Queen of Heaven to worship the Queen of Heaven and receive power and blessing from idols. So Paul here you need to restore family order. Women should not be like that. So it's to compare with us today, it's not the case. We are not influenced by that. But you must know the background back then. What's the intention of Paul of writing that? He wants to stop women to arise and do such corrupt thing. So as you read on, and you put on the context in the setting, to the believers at the time, Paul was restoring the family order for the male, female. It's not saying that women cannot preach in church. But of course, in the temple prostitute did that, right? So that's why for the Ephesian and the Corinthian church, the women also did that. So Apostle Paul commanded Timothy to do this. How do you be a senior pastor? How do you be an apostle? You need to wage the good warfare. You need to deal with the false teachers and those who persecuted me, so that they do not share other false doctrines. And the second step, Timothy, you need to pray for all men, Timothy. Men, do what you should do. Take the lead. You are the authority. You are the head. So I exhort, first of all, that supplication, prayer, intercession, and giving of thanks be made for all men, for kings, for all who are in authority. Pray for all men, pray for kings, supplication, prayers, intercession, and giving of thanks be made for them. So be a good leader. You lift up your praying hand. God will bless you. God bless people through you. You are the source of blessings. Women, men, you are the source of blessing. Senior pastor, you are the source of blessing to the whole world. That's what we are saying today. And for husbands, in verse 8, I desire, therefore, that you are the source of blessing in the family, blessing your wife, your children. I desire, therefore, that the men pray everywhere, lifting up holy hands without doubting. I will finish verse 1 to 7 first. Timothy, rise up. How to deal with the false teachers, the cult? How do you bring peace to brothers and sisters? You need to have love and faith, good conscience, sincere faith. You need to pray. You are an apostle, Timothy. Lift up your hand and pray for all the earth. God will listen to you, hear your prayers. And this is pleasing to God. This is what God wants you to do. Now you have the authority. As the high priest, can you not bless the people? You are the priest. How can you not pray? You pray. Blessing comes, power comes. Timothy, as a senior pastor, you must pray. And it's reminded me and our co-workers, we must pray more. Don't just give the power of the prayer to Pastor Anna because she's in charge of the prayer department. Pastor Jason, I thank God that you have changed. Now you pray a lot. I'm reminding myself, I need to lift up my hand and pray. As I do this, I'm exercising authority from God to me. I will bring blessings. And God put me as a senior pastor of 611 on behalf and representing you all. That's what God wants and is pleasing to God. Who desires all men to be saved and to come to knowledge of the truth. Verse 4. Verse 5, for there is one God and one mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus, who gave himself a ransom for all to be testified in due time, for which I was appointed a preacher and apostle. That's how God has appointed me. And because then that I will entrust in your hand. Timothy, arise and be an apostle. Share this good news. Resist the false teacher and everything. You must pray because you are the source of blessing. I desire, therefore, verse 8, that the men pray everywhere, lifting up holy hands without wrath and doubting. Men are easily to be angry and doubting and arguing. Wrath and doubting about what? They are being controlled by their wife, because in Ephesus, the power of the Queen of Heaven was so strong. Everyone thinks that they have the power of a Queen of Heaven. They worship a Queen of Heaven. They need to exercise their authority. They do not submit themselves under their husbands. For the Corinthian church, the women did not even, they were not with the husband. They thought that they were holy enough. Husband, don't touch me. I'm holy. The whole world is dirty. I am an angel. That's Corinthian church women. But in Corinthian, and Paul says that you should have, that's why they need to cover their head. That means they have husband, they need to submit to their husband. So in church, that's why the women cover their head. That means they have their own husband. Anything they want to say, they say to their husband. If you have anything to say, you tell your husband. Don't tell other men. Otherwise, it will be just like a temple prostitute. That's how a woman should behave. But for Ephesus, men without wrath and doubting, because they were controlled, they were dominated, they were so upset about it. I remember Charlie leading a cell group. Our teaching, she has received a lot, his wife. And then Charlie's like, why? Why, Maylin, you are doing all the leading? But how come me? I cannot share in the cell group. I don't agree. So he felt so upset. When the women in Ephesus were like that, then the men will be in wrath and doubt and argumentative. They like to reason. They like to talk sense. So Paul said, man, you are an authority head. You are the source of blessing. I desire, therefore, the man pray every place. Man, pray every place, lifting up holy hands without wrath and doubting. No, not angry, not argumentative. Just keep praying. Do not be angry. Do not be argumentative. Do not argue with your wife. You need to pray. You are her blessing. You just pray. Especially at home. You need to become the authority of blessing. In like manner, verse 9, that the women adorn themselves in modest apparel with propriety and moderation, not with braided hair or gold or pearls or costly clothing, but which is proper for women professing godliness with good works. Let a woman learn in silence with all submissions, and I do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man, but to be in silence. For Adam, verse 12, and I do not permit a woman to teach. I do not permit a woman to teach. Just like in the temple prostitutes were teaching. Teaching is a ritual. They teach and then people listen before them and then have sex with them. That's the situation. I do not permit this situation to happen at home. And not to have authority over a man. That women will exercise authority over a man. You have no authority over a man. Don't act like you have authority. Don't act like you are a queen of heaven. You act like you are the Artemis, the goddess. These are idols. In church, we come out of the world. We come out of the idol worshipping. We do not follow the world. So man, rise up to be head. And women, you need to submit under authority. So that's the title I will give for today. Do not follow the world. And then colon, man, take the authority to be head, and a woman under your husband. Do not rule over your husband like you have authority. You need to be quiet. Do not be like Diana, the goddess. Verse 9, in like manner also, that the women adorn themselves in modest apparel, in orderly. There is an order. The order is you are a wife. Then you need to dress yourself like a wife, like the wife of your husband. You are not a temple prostitute. Do not dress yourself like a temple prostitute. Just like in the past, before you became a Christian, you went to the temple and all the temple prostitutes dress like that. They dress like they have authority, they are powerful. So the temple prostitutes are like that. That they will braid their hair, gold or pearls or costly clothing. They dress like temple prostitute. Women do not dress like a temple prostitute. And exercise authority over men. But verse 10, but which is proper for women professing godliness with good works. Proper, orderly. With shamefacedness. You need to have shame. You need to watch your order, women. You don't look at other men and say, hey, flirt with you, flirt with them. You need to be next to your husband, be modest, and to show that you have a husband. If you want to talk to other people, then tell your husband first. You do not relate to any other man as you like, because you have your own husband. Your apparel should be orderly and not like a temple prostitute. Be a wife. You need to show yourself as a wife. Godliness, you need to be sound-minded. Do not be affected by the world. With good works. Everything that you described here is the good works. Then you can say that you are professing godliness. So these women think that they are godly. What is godliness to them? Proper for women professing godliness. You think that you are godly, you fear God. Just like the women in Corinthian church, they think that they are angels, they are godly, they fear God. But actually, before coming to Christ, they worship Queen of Heaven. After coming to Christ, they move the Queen of Heaven to help. But they do the same after they become Christian. They do not change. So his intention was for all these women to come out of the idol worshipping and the culture, the customs from idol worshipping. Women, in the past, you say you belong to Diana, you are powerful, you are authoritative, you dress like temple prostitutes, or representing Diana, representing Queen of Heaven. Now you become a Christian, you are different. You have a husband. You need to behave, conduct as a wife, and adorn yourself and conduct yourself moderately. You think that you are powerful. You think that you fear God. But you do not fear God the way as a temple prostitute. You need to imitate Jesus. Then that will be good. Let a woman learn in silence with all submission. Verse 11. Verse 11. Verse 10. But which is proper for women professing godliness with good works. Godliness also means God-fearing. For a woman who professes to be God-fearing, they need to show by good works. What is a good work? Before the apparel, they need to be quiet, silent. How do they learn? They need to learn in silence with all submission. Submission to authority. That's verse 1 to 10. They need to submit under their husband. Their husband are their authority. And the husband will tell them. And they don't go to other husbands and just chit-chat. No, that's not the case. It should be this case. You are wrong. That's temple prostitutes. Before they became Christians at home, they did that. They blah, 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 blah. No, at home, you should know that you are the wife of your husband. You need to learn from your husband. Verse 12, I do not permit a woman to teach or have authority over a man. Not to rule over a man. Don't teach your husband like a temple prostitute. Like you're full of authority. Don't think that you have authority above your husband, because Adam was formed first, then Eve. Husband carries authority, and wife must submit under the husband. And woman was deceived first. But verse 15, if you have faith, love, holiness with self-control, you fear God, God will bless you. You will be safe in childbearing. This chapter, my conclusion is talk about a family order between man and woman. It's not a church order, whether a woman can preach, can worship in church, or can share. In the Jewish synagogue, they have women quarter and then men quarters. In the synagogue, after they become Christians, they live together. But the idol worshipping will come into the influence, come into family, come into the church. That's why Paul said, do not speak in church. That's the meaning of it. And then in Ephesian church, it talks about family order, not church order. The relationship between wife and husband at home. May God help us. My perspective from exegesis, from original text, from historical background, I think that's the meaning of Paul. I do thank God. We have a lot of denomination in the world. They are changing their view on this ordaining, like on the women. Sex women, brothers and sisters, we are blessed. So thank you. This is the end of the message.